I stepped into the house I once called home. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic bread wrapping around me like a familiar old blanket. The worn hardwood floors creaked under my feet, and family photos lined the hallway. My graduation, Mark's soccer trophies, Ryan's high school prom. In the dining room, my parents sat at the head of the table, their faces lined with years and unspoken words. Mark and Ryan lounged in their chairs, trading smug glances like they were in on a joke I hadn't been told. "Emily," my mother began softly, twisting her wedding ring. "We wanted you to hear this from us." My father cleared his throat, not quite meeting my eyes. "We've finalized our will. Everything is going to Mark and Ryan." For a heartbeat, the room went utterly still. The laughter, the clink of silverware, even the clock on the wall seemed to stop. And just like that, something inside me cracked. I felt the chair press into my back, as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. My eyes flicked from Mark to Ryan, then to my parents. Mark leaned back, his arms crossed, wearing a grin that belonged on a poker table. "You've got a good job, Em," he said casually. "You'll be fine." Ryan chuckled, his fingers drumming the table. "Yeah, you don't need anything. You're the golden child, right?" I turned to my mother, hoping, praying, for some kind of explanation, some reassurance. But all I got was a soft, faint smile. "Honey, you've always been the responsible one. Your brothers, they're still figuring life out." 1,000 memories flashed through my mind. Paying off their credit cards when they were in over their heads, covering Dad's medical bills when insurance fell short, sending money for Mark's tuition when he changed his major for the 3rd time. The nights I stayed late at work so I could wire Ryan money when his car broke down, for the 2nd time that year. I clenched my hands beneath the table, nails biting into my palms. "After everything I've done," I murmured, "you've decided I don't matter." My mother gave a weary sigh, like I was being difficult. "Emily, not everything is about money." A bitter laugh escaped me. "No, it's about what I can provide. It's always been about that." Mark rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic." Ryan smirked. "Maybe if you weren't trying so hard to play hero, you wouldn't be so upset." I looked at my father then, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who'd sat in the bleachers at my piano recitals. But tonight, he couldn't even meet my gaze. The scent of roasted chicken and garlic bread, once so comforting, now felt cloying, heavy. Slowly, I rose from the table. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. "If that's your decision," I said, "then here's mine. From now on, don't expect anything from me." The scrape of my chair against the floor was the only sound in the room as I left. No one called after me. No one stopped me. As I walked down the hallway, lined with childhood memories, I realized this wasn't my home anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. The drive home felt endless. Streetlights blurred past, the radio murmured quietly in the background, but my mind was a storm. I kept hearing their voices, Mom's calm dismissal, Mark's smug laugh, Ryan's cutting remarks. Over and over, like a song on repeat, they spun through my head. When I reached my apartment, I stood in the entryway for a moment, keys still in hand, just staring at the darkened room. For years, this place had felt temporary, like a rest stop between the responsibilities that ruled my life. Tonight, for the first time, it was just mine. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the couch. The weight in my chest was so heavy, it was almost hard to breathe. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, lighting up with a familiar notification. Automatic transfer complete. I opened the banking app. There it was. $1,200 to my parents, $600 to Mark and Ryan, scheduled like clockwork. For a moment, my finger hovered over the edit button. I could hear Mom's voice in my head. Family supports each other. But I also heard Ryan laughing, Mark scoffing, my father looking away as if I were invisible. I tapped cancel. A simple message popped up. Recurring payments successfully canceled. I set the phone down, exhaling slowly. That night, the calls began. First, Mom. "Emily, the mortgage payment didn't go through. Is there an issue with your account?" "No. Mom," I said quietly. "I canceled it." A pause. Then her voice sharpened. Why would you do that? You know we rely on that money. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep calm. Because I can't keep doing this, Mom. Emily, we are a family. Families help each other. I closed my eyes. Mom, I have helped. For years. But you've made it clear. The only part of me that matters to you is the part that pays your bills. Her voice rose, trembling with anger. I can't believe you're acting like this. You're selfish. You're not the daughter I raised. I swallowed hard. No, Mom, I'm not. I'm the daughter you raised to put everyone first, and I'm done. I hung up before she could say more. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, but beneath the fear and guilt was something new, something fierce, relief. But the next morning brought a wave I hadn't expected. Text after text poured in. Mark, you're unbelievable. Do you even care what you're doing to this family? Ryan, guess money's all you care about. Enjoy your perfect life. My father, a rare blunt message. I'm disappointed in you. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, blinking back tears. Even when you know you're right, even when you know you're saving yourself, it still hurts. That weekend, I kept busy. I cleaned the apartment, went for long walks, and caught up with friends I hadn't seen in months. But the calls kept coming. The guilt kept tapping at my shoulder. By Sunday night, I sat on the balcony, a blanket around my shoulders, looking out over the city. The air was cool, crisp, alive with distant sounds of laughter and traffic. For the first time, I let myself sit in the silence, not trying to fix it, not trying to explain myself, not trying to apologize. Just me, just quiet. And little by little, the quiet began to feel like home. The days that followed were a blur of noise and tension. My phone became a battlefield. Calls, texts, voicemails, all demanding explanations I no longer owed. At first, I ignored them. But one morning, as I scrolled through social media, I felt my stomach drop. There it was, my mother's long Facebook post. Carefully written, heartbreakingly polished. She wrote about sacrifice, about how parents give everything for their children, only to be abandoned when they're old and tired. She didn't mention names, but everyone knew. By lunchtime, the comments flooded in. So sad when kids forget their parents. Money really changes people. Praying for your family? I felt my chest tighten, my fingers going cold. For a moment, I thought of letting it go. Taking the hits in silence, the way I always had. But then, a memory surfaced. The night I canceled the payments. The moment I'd sat alone in the quiet and realized I was finally free. I opened my own page and wrote. I wrote about the mortgage payments I'd covered, the tuition I'd paid, the credit card debt I'd erased, the emergencies I'd handled without question. I didn't write to shame them. I wrote because I was tired of erasing myself. When I hit post, my hands shook, my breath shallow in my chest. The response came fast. Some family members messaged in private, stunned. A few apologized. Friends reached out with quiet support. But most telling was the silence from my parents, Mark and Ryan. That night, I sat on the couch, exhausted, but strangely at peace, until the knock on the door. I opened it to find my apartment hallway filled with a sharp, chemical smell. My front door was sealed shut with hardened industrial foam, the lock and handle buried under the mess. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. Then I checked the security footage. There was Ryan in a hoodie, laughing as he sprayed the foam into every crack and crevice. My hands trembled as I called the police. A quiet, calm officer arrived within the hour. As we watched the footage together, he looked at me and asked, "Do you want to press charges?" I took a deep breath. My heart pounded. And then I heard myself say, "Yes." For the first time, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. I was the one drawing the line. The next morning, the phone rang again. This time, it was my father. "Emily," he began, his voice low and tense. "How could you do this to your brother?" I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring across the wood, my coffee cooling in my hands. "Dad," I said softly. "He vandalized my home. He crossed a line, I'm not covering for him anymore. There was a long pause. Then, in a clipped voice, "How much to make this go away?" $3,000. I didn't hesitate. By afternoon, the money hit my account, along with a bitter message from Ryan. "You're dead to us." I read it, and to my surprise, felt nothing. That weekend, I unplugged. I turned off my phone, took myself to the park, and watched families laugh and play under the autumn trees. I let the sunlight touch my face. I sat on a bench with a book I hadn't opened in years. For the first time, I felt a sense of space inside me, like a room that had always been crowded was finally empty. Empty, yes, but also open. As I walked home that evening, the city lights flickering on one by one, I realized something simple and true. Freedom wasn't the absence of pain. It was the ability to choose. And for once, I was choosing myself. 3 weeks passed in a silence so deep, it was almost a character in my apartment. No calls, no texts, no guilt-laced voicemails. At first, the quiet rattled me. I would catch myself glancing at my phone, half expecting to see Mom or Mark light up the screen. My fingers hovered over the keypad more times than I'd admit, wanting to reach out, to explain, to soothe. But I didn't. I let the silence stand. Slowly, the tension in my shoulders eased. My mornings stopped feeling like countdowns to disaster. I began sleeping through the night for the first time in years. At work, something unexpected happened. Without the endless distractions, I threw myself into a major project. I arrived early, stayed late, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. My efforts paid off. The day I got the promotion, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in my new office, watching the city stretch out below. The skyline was glowing, alive, unapologetic. For the first time, I felt the same way. I celebrated alone that night, sitting at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment, a glass of wine in hand. As I ate, I realized this was the first meal I'd treated myself to in years. No urgent transfers, no panicked Venmo requests, no late-night Zelle payments. Just me, at a table for one, enjoying the simple pleasure of existing. And then, on a quiet Saturday, I did something bold. I booked a flight to Italy. Florence welcomed me with open arms. The air smelled of coffee, stone, and the faint trace of old churches. The cobblestone streets felt like a story under my feet. I wandered through museums, stood awestruck before towering cathedrals, and let myself become small in the best way. I sat at cafes, sipping espresso, watching locals laugh and lovers bicker. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the Arno River, I found myself seated at a cafe near Piazza della Signoria. "You look like someone who's fallen for this city," a voice said. I looked up, startled. A man stood there, soft smile, easy posture. "I think I have," I said, returning the smile. His name was Alex, a New Yorker, an interior designer, a fellow wanderer. We fell into conversation with the ease of old friends. For the next few days, we explored Florence together, sampling gelato, strolling through markets, watching the city come alive under the glow of sunset. There was no pressure, no expectations, no past to explain. Just two people meeting each other exactly where they were. One evening, on a rooftop terrace overlooking the city, Alex turned to me. "So, Emily, what's next?" I smiled, watching the city lights twinkle like scattered stars. "Whatever I want," I whispered. Back home, life unfolded gently. I joined a Sunday yoga class where I met people who became friends. I filled my weekends with museum visits, long walks, and quiet mornings reading in bed. Christmas arrived, and for the first time, I didn't go home. Instead, I hosted a small gathering. Friends, laughter, music, and Aunt Linda, the only family member who'd stood by me. She showed up with a box of cookies and a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you, Emily," she said as I handed her a glass of wine. Her words sank deep, wrapping around something inside me that had long gone hungry. That night, as midnight approached, I stood on my balcony, a soft blanket over my shoulders, a glass of wine in hand. The city below sparkled in the winter night, the hum of life steady and constant. I thought about all that had happened, the loss, the heartbreak, the discovery, and I realized something profound. Family isn't made of blood, it's made of choice, of people who see you, not for what you can give, but for who you are. My parents had cut me out of their will, thinking they were punishing me, but in doing so, they had unknowingly set me free. I lifted my glass slightly toward the sky, as if toasting the stars, and whispered to myself, "Here's to me. Here's to freedom. Here's to finally coming home. Not to them, not to a place, but to myself." It was late January when the message came. "Emily, I know you don't want to hear this, but your parents are struggling." Aunt Linda's words sat on my screen like a stone. She went on. Dad was working warehouse night shifts. Mom had taken up cleaning jobs. Mark had been fired from his tech job. Ryan's influencer dreams had quietly fizzled out. I set the phone down and sat in the silence of my apartment. For a long time, I just stared at the wall, letting the old familiar pull of guilt stir inside me. The voice in my head whispered, "This is your chance to fix things. They need you." But another voice, steady and clear, rose to meet it. "You have already done enough." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time, I chose to let life unfold without me holding it all together. As winter melted into spring, I found myself blooming too. I deepened my friendships, found joy in quiet routines, and learned the art of being alone without feeling lonely. On Easter Sunday, I walked through the park, watching families gather under blooming cherry trees. I thought of my own family, not with bitterness, but with a quiet acceptance. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. Months later, as summer arrived, Aunt Linda came to visit again. We sat on my balcony with glasses of lemonade, watching the sun sink below the horizon. "I wish they had seen your worth before it was too late," she said softly. I reached over, squeezing her hand with a smile. Maybe they set me free in the only way they knew how. As the city lights flickered to life, I thought about the years I had spent measuring my worth by what I gave. Now, for the first time, I was measuring it by how fully I lived. Family, I realized, isn't just the people you're born to. It's the people who stand with you, who lift you, who see you for who you are. And as I sat there, surrounded by a life I had built piece by piece, I knew I hadn't lost everything. I had found myself.